The film opens in Papua New Guinea, where a teenage boy named Josh is waiting at a small dock for Carl Hurley and his girlfriend Victoria to arrive. Carl has poured a huge amount of money into a dangerous expedition deep in the jungle because a massive underwater cave system has recently been discovered there. No one has fully mapped it yet, and what makes it even more mysterious is the powerful river flowing inside it. The team does not know where that water is coming from, and Carl wants to be part of the expedition that finally uncovers the truth. Josh's father, Frank McGuire, one of the best cave divers in the world, has been leading the mission. For the last 2 weeks, Frank and his team have been exploring the cave system known as Isa Allah, but it stretches for kilometers, and they still have not reached the end. Once Carl and Victoria arrive, Josh greets them and takes them by helicopter to the remote cave site. Carl is the wealthy backer of the mission, the kind of man who loves adventure and is willing to spend whatever it takes to chase something extraordinary. Victoria is not nearly as excited as he is, but the moment they reach the cave, even she is stunned by how enormous and beautiful the place is. As soon as they land, though, it becomes clear that something is wrong. Workers are already moving equipment away from the site. When Carl asks what is happening, he is told that a major storm is on the way. The crew wants to move the gear somewhere safer, and ideally they would evacuate completely. But Carl did not come all this way just to turn back, so he insists they are still going down. Far below the surface, Frank and his team have already built a forward base inside the cave, nearly 2 kilometers underground. Among the divers is Judes, who has spent the last couple of weeks down there helping explore the system. Their goal is simple in theory but terrifying in practice. Follow the water, find the path it takes, and discover where this underground river begins or where it leads. That day, Judes is supposed to head into a newly discovered section of the cave, but one of Frank's teammates points out that she looks exhausted. Weeks without sunlight and constant stress have clearly taken a toll on her. Frank notices it too, so instead of sending her alone, he decides to go with her himself. Back above, Victoria is shown a rough 3D map of the cave system. It is still incomplete, but even from the unfinished model, it is obvious this place is not just one cave. It is an enormous maze of chambers, tunnels, drops, and underwater passages. Soon, Josh, Carl, and Victoria prepare to descend. Carl even turns it into a competition, joking that he will get down before Josh. While Josh and Victoria make the dangerous descent with ropes, Carl uses a powered device to drop faster and reaches the lower level first. Victoria is overwhelmed the moment she sees the underground world with her own eyes. The place feels less like a cave and more like another planet, but not everything is calm below. Frank is already angry with Josh because he had given him an important job earlier: take extra bailout cylinders to the correct point in the cave. Josh never did it, and that mistake is about to matter. By the time Josh reaches the base, Frank and Judes have already entered the water. The team has placed spare cylinders at different spots because these dives are long, dangerous, and carefully calculated. On the way in, Judes takes one of the cylinders meant to help her through the journey. As Frank and Judes continue their dive, Frank notices a narrow new passage and decides to investigate it. The way through is tight and partly blocked with rock, but after clearing enough space, Frank squeezes through first and Judes follows behind him. They manage to break into a new chamber, and for a moment it feels like a breakthrough. Above them, they can actually see an air pocket and open surface. It is proof that the cave system continues farther than they thought, but they cannot stay there long, because if they push any farther, they may not have enough oxygen left to make it back, so they turn around. Then, disaster strikes. On the return trip, Judes loses her air supply. Back at the monitoring station, the others realize something has gone terribly wrong. Her backup tank is too far away, and there is no chance she can reach it in time. Frank reacts immediately. He removes his own mask and starts sharing air with her, letting them breathe from the same source one after another. But that solution only works for a few desperate moments. They cannot swim properly like that, and if nothing changes, both of them will die. Frank is forced into an impossible decision. Knowing there is not enough oxygen for both of them to get back, he tears the mask away from Judes and pushes her back. She drowns, and Frank is the only one who returns alive. For everyone at the base, it is a horrifying moment. No one says much because they understand how brutal the situation was. Either both divers would die, or only one would come back. Most of the team sees it as a terrible survival decision, but Josh does not. Watching it happen fills him with rage. To him, it looks like his father chose to let Judes die. He blames Frank completely, while the rest of the divers believe Frank did the only thing possible. A little later, Frank comes back carrying Judes' body, and by then he has already heard the things Josh said about him. The tension that had been building between father and son finally explodes. They start arguing, and Frank, furious and hurt, tells Josh to get lost because he does not need him there anymore. Josh is ready to walk away, and when Carl tries to step in, Frank snaps at him too and tells him not to interfere. One of Frank's teammates, Luco, senses that Josh is angry enough to do something reckless, so he decides to go with him. At the same time, the storm above ground is getting closer. The people on the surface are struggling to save themselves, and the heavy rain begins damaging equipment. Communication with the team below becomes unreliable. Josh, Luco, and the others are preparing to move upward when they hear something terrifying: the sound of rushing water. The storm has started flooding the cave. That changes everything instantly. If they do not get out soon, they will be trapped down there and drowned. They try to climb using the ropes, but the water keeps rising and the current keeps growing stronger. Josh and Luco could still try to escape on their own, but Josh changes his mind. No matter how angry he is at Frank, he cannot leave the others behind without warning them. So he and Luco head back to the forward camp. By the time they return, the flooding has already begun. The calm cave is turning into a death trap. Frank quickly understands that the known route out may soon be impossible, so he orders everyone to move through another part of the system. Since he and his team have already spent weeks exploring down there, he knows some alternate passages that might lead upward and away from the incoming water. Carl and Victoria finally realize how badly trapped they are, and for the first time, Carl's confidence starts to crack. At this point, whether they like Frank or not, their only chance of surviving is to follow him. They tie themselves off and try to cross through a narrow chamber one at a time. Luco goes first, then Josh and Victoria after him. But on the other side, a huge boulder has been loosened by the pressure of the floodwater. Before everyone can get through safely, the rock shifts. Luco tries to hold on, but no human being can fight that kind of force. Josh and Victoria are thrown back into the water, and when Luco jumps, he does not land safely. Instead, he slams into rock and is swept away by the current. Josh tries to save him, but Luco disappears into the flood. Their safest route is now gone. With no easy path left, the group is forced to continue through the submerged sections of the cave. Frank removes the thermal suit from Jude's body because Victoria is freezing, and that suit might be the only thing that keeps her alive in the water. But Victoria refuses. She is horrified by the idea of wearing clothes taken from a dead woman and insists she is fine, even though she clearly is not. Frank does not waste time arguing with her. The bigger problem is that Victoria is not an experienced cave diver at all, yet now she has no choice but to keep going deeper into a flooded labyrinth. Frank tells George to stay close to her because from this point on, one mistake could get her killed. The only path Frank still trusted was the one he and Jude's had discovered earlier, the route that led up to a higher chamber with air above the water. His thinking was simple. If they could reach that elevated section, the flood might not swallow them immediately. But getting there was going to be hardest for Victoria. She had never done a dive like this before, and now she had to move through freezing water and tight underwater rock passages, while panic was rising all around her. George stayed close to her and tried to keep her focused while Frank led the group through the cave. One by one, they squeezed through the narrow restriction. Victoria almost froze in the passage when fear got the better of her, but George kept talking her through it until she finally forced herself out the other side. When they reached the air chamber, Victoria was in terrible shape. She was shaking badly from the cold, and now the earlier decision to refuse Jude's wetsuit was catching up with her. Frank and George did whatever they could to warm her, but the situation was getting worse for everyone. Frank himself was already struggling physically, and the cave was giving them almost no time to recover. After a while, Victoria looked a little better, but only enough to keep moving. Carl wanted them to stay put and wait for rescuers, convinced someone would eventually find them. Frank shut that idea down immediately. He had brought them into a hidden part of the cave system that almost no one else knew existed, so waiting there would likely mean dying there. Whether Carl liked it or not, the only chance left was to keep pushing forward. As they moved deeper through the system, another problem started to grow. George was fading. The dive had taken too much out of him, and even though he tried not to show it, he knew he was dying. Eventually, the group reached what looked like a dead end. Between them and the next section of the route was a violent drop with rushing water below, strong enough to kill anyone who fell into it. They had to rig a line across and move one person at a time. While everyone focused on the crossing, George quietly disappeared. He realized he was only slowing the others down, so instead of forcing them to watch him die, he hid himself and let the team go on without him. Since Josh was the strongest climber, he got the line across first and helped prepare the route for the others. Frank came over, and then it was Victoria's turn. But in the middle of the crossing, disaster hit. She lost control and her hair became tangled in the rope gear. Suddenly, all of her weight was hanging from that one point, tearing at her scalp while she screamed in pain. Frank tried to guide her, but she panicked. In desperation, Victoria pulled out her knife and started cutting. Instead of freeing herself safely, she cut the wrong thing, lost her support, and plunged to her death below. Carl was destroyed. He could do nothing except watch the woman he loved die right in front of him. After that, the group was broken. Frank believed the next flooded passage might finally open into the sea, because by then they had traveled far enough through the cave for that to make sense. The problem was oxygen. They did not have enough left for everyone. Frank and Josh checked ahead, but when they came back, Carl had stolen the last remaining rebreather and fled on his own, leaving them trapped. With no better option, Frank and Josh searched for another route and discovered a narrow crevasse that led into a strange, sunlit cavern. There, unbelievably, they found an old Japanese tank that had crashed through from the surface long ago. For a moment it felt like salvation, but the opening was too high to reach, so even that chamber turned into another prison. They waited, rested, and then were forced to go back into the cave once night fell. When they found Carl again, he was badly injured, half-starved, and no longer thinking clearly. He had failed to find the exit, and somewhere along the way, he had fallen apart mentally. At first he seemed relieved to see Josh and Frank, but the guilt, fear, and grief inside him had twisted into rage. He blamed Frank for Victoria's death and attacked him. Josh tried to stop the fight, but the damage was already done. Frank ended up gravely wounded, with a serious injury in his back. Carl eventually understood how far everything had gone and vanished again into the darkness. Not long after, he threw himself into the water without oxygen and disappeared for good. Now, only Frank and Josh were left. Frank knew he was dying and also knew he could not make the final swim. In terrible pain, he asked Josh to do the one thing no son should ever have to do: end his suffering so Josh could take the remaining air and keep going. Josh did it through tears, then took the small cylinder and entered the water alone. He swam through the blackness for what felt like forever, with almost no oxygen left and no sign that freedom even existed ahead. Then, just when it seemed hopeless, he saw light. Josh pushed toward it with the last of his strength and finally burst out of the cave into the open ocean. He crawled onto shore, barely alive, where local fishermen found him and helped him. That is where the story ends.